had this addiction to this drug and I'm done. Another situation. So we have another client we've been taking care of for a while, and they're riddled with a lot of addiction and a lot of just past dark. And so what's crazy is this particular client has had a whole bunch of stuff going on. There's no way that this person can afford care, let alone for their entire family. But what I realize is I think the way to actually help people is to, again, just love them where they're at. But because the ego has been broken and the pride has been broken, I can identify those places that are not truly like me or who God, I would argue, called us to be. What's up, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Profitable Chiro Network. And a few years ago, I, in practice, thought I needed another marketing strategy, more new clients, even better adjusting technique. And what I realized is that was all wrong. It was completely unfounded, and it actually didn't benefit me because I built my practice entirely on ego. And most chiropractors, I think, they believe that the challenge or the struggle in their business or the thing that's holding them back is another marketing strategy, a new technique to learn, a new way to serve people, adding a new service, a new set of playbooks or a new set of systems. And I'm here to tell you today that that is absolutely 100% not true, because what will happen and what you'll realize through this episode and what I want to teach you today is exactly how you can start to figure out and start to notice where you're living out of pride, which will wreck you, and where you're living out of ego, which will hold you back, and how you can start to live out of a place of love the way Jesus wanted us to, and how that will ultimately completely transform your practice more so than the tactics involved. So should we jump in?
Yeah.
Let's do it. I have two stories. You haven't been in the office for either of these.
Okay.
But I'm stoked to share them because we talked a lot about them, even though you weren't here in those moments when they were happening. So the first one, if you guys have been listening for a while and you know, because this kind of wrecked us back in the day, is that a few episodes ago we posted about, and I talked about the story of the guy who left us the bad review.
Right.
And how it just completely destroyed me.
Yes.
Well, the cool thing about having that experience, as I shared, is it showed me all of these inconsistencies and incongruencies in who I was, how I had this pride. And I'll define pride on this episode, and we'll talk about ego a little bit later. But I had this pride and this ego, and everything was kind of founded on me. And it all became about me. People's results were because I'm a great chiropractor, and the business is great because I was great. And if I just worked harder, I was the master of the ship, or the captain of destiny, or whatever you want to say. So what's cool, having that experience, and I shared this in the other episode, is it allowed me to realize some things about myself. But this is what's even cooler. So a few weeks ago, we had a new client come in, and they brought one of their kids in. And I noticed a lot of the exact same tendencies from this client that I did to the person who left us the bad review over a year ago.
Do you want to share what those tendencies are?
Yeah, so there was just there was a general, I love that you asked that question. So there was a general, if you've ever sat with a new client and they're seem very uninterested and unentertained and almost inconvenienced that they have to go through the process with you. But kind, and they're listening, but you can just tell.
More that glazed over
there's
look.
A glazed over look in their eyes where it's kind of the way I would describe it is it seems like they don't care. But it gets weird because then you're sitting there and you're going, all right, well, they have to care because they know what our price is. They know, and especially if you're doing a good job communicating, they know what our prices are. They know how we do things, and they know this is different because Danielle does an amazing job at the front desk of laying that out before someone ever steps foot in our office.
Right.
This was someone who was referred to us. And so it's so weird because I'm sitting there going through the exam process, explaining, and I think anybody who listens and watches, I get ultimately fired up about doing this stuff and just so passionate that I can't help it.
Right.
And so long story short, sitting there and I'm this person's just not interested at all. There's no way that they care. But continue to go through the process, just like the person who left us the bad review. And I think the whole team could just feel this stress and this weight. And this energy. And my thing, I literally was saying this to the team. I'm I hope that they don't start care.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
Which is not necessarily the healthiest place to come from.
Sure.
But I felt like it wasn't a good fit. So there's two ways that.
Can you explain why you like wouldn't have thought it was a good fit, meaning like why you wouldn't have wanted them to start?
Yeah, so it's not a fact. I knew that the person they were bringing in was going to get great care.
Sure.
So it had nothing to do with that. I knew that they would get great results.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I think people can be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And when they want to like pick apart every single little nuance of everything that you're doing, or they just don't like, they almost treat you like you're an inconvenience to their day, even though they showed up asking for help.
Okay.
And so there was something to it, but more of the challenge was like, I felt this, the only way I could describe it is like a presence of trying to knock me off the joy and excitement that I have about providing care to people. And so I personally, if we think about running a practice, like where my ego would have been like, oh, I can help you, guarantee he's going to get results, and try to convince them that I'm the best in the world.
Right.
Instead, it was more of a place like this time around, coming from a place of like, I know that you're going to get good results, but I don't know if I want the weight of how hard I'm going to have to work to please you to carry that to the rest of the people that we take care of.
Because like the pleasing process is more stress than actually supporting and helping them.
Yep, exactly. So an example of this would be like we send out a follow-up email after they do their exam, and this person kind of brought up, there were a few things in the follow-up email that they were like, I do not agree with this. I feel like this is, and they weren't mad about it, but it was a clear indication again of that them trying to pick apart like any little thing that we would possibly say.
Right.
And there's some other things too. I don't want to give away like who the person is.
Well, almost as if like they didn't want to be told what to do. They wanted to make the choices in their own timing, on their own, like, I don't know what the right word with that, but
yeah, well, it's like
they
I'm going to
wanted
tell
to-
you
yes.
how I get care, because the traditional medical model goes like this: is like you see an ad for a drug on TV and it says ask your doctor about it, so then you go in and ask your doctor. But here, like, that's just not how it works. We're going to measure your brain,
right.
we're going to figure out exactly what you need, and we're going to pray on it, and then we're going to provide that to you based on obedience and based on what we find in your exam. Like, it's very tailored to you. So when people go backhanded and they're like, well, I don't want to do that, I want to do what I want to do, it's just an incongruency on our part, because you would never go to like a trainer once a month and expect to get really good results, or like get a six-pack if you're going
Right.
to like a physical trainer or whatever.
You
the
honestly
gym.
would never even go to like a medical doctor and say, other than like taking the pill, like, but they tell you exactly what you need and you're not allowed to question.
Yeah.
Or say like, well, I want this instead. And it's like they are the ruler in that regards.
Yeah, exactly. So the situation is like, okay, there's this person in our office again who seems like, okay, they're not going to be a good fit. And I could either try to will it, ego, pride, I'm the best, Nexus is the best, we're going to get them results no matter what, convince them to do what I thought was the right thing for them to do, or step out of that completely and just be like, you know what, all we can do as a team is just love this person as much as possible and let them make the decision. And if they don't like our emails, or they don't like the way we communicate, or if they don't like me or whatever it is, it's not a reflection of me. It's not a rejection of me. It's a rejection of something greater. And what we have to do as a team is literally just create a space and a presence that's undeniable, that the reason that we are here is just to help people. And all the other stuff either goes away, or they can't get out, that person can't get out of their own way, and they decide that we're not going to be a good fit because there's like just too much, like, I know it sounds ridiculous and so woo-woo and out there, but like there's too much love in here. And we get to set the atmosphere. So I go home. I had you and Coco pray for me, and pray for the office, and pray for the team, and figure out like, what are we going to do? Because there was a part of me that wanted, and Danielle and I had this conversation, there's a part of me that's like, I just want to tell them like, hey, I don't think we're a good fit. And we actually tried that, like, lovingly, because there were so many questions and so many objections. So long story short, they ended up starting care.
Yeah, because you offered other chiropractors. Yes.
Yeah, I was like, we can find you somebody else who feels like a good fit. And it was just continually. But the difference is before I was like, we're the best, and I'm going to convince you that we're the best,
Right.
and I'm going to guarantee you the sun and the moon and the stars, because it's about Dr. Daniel and about Nexus, not about the person who we're trying to serve. And so I like detach myself from all those normal strategies that you would learn as like a salesperson. And what's cool is the transformation that we've seen And I think the whole family. And like, we're not even taking care of this person who I'm talking about.
Right.
So they brought another one of their kiddos in, and just kind of a completely different, like, guard let down mentality. But it's because instead of leading from a place of pride and ego, it's leading from a place that is way more in line with just like, we're going to love them unconditionally, unapologetically for who they are and where they are. And even though they might have some darkness and believe different things than we do, spiritually, like, all we can do is just show up, in my opinion, the way that Jesus would for anybody. And like, the best story I could give in the Bible is when Jesus, like, they bring the prostitute to Jesus, and they're like, hey, like, we need to stone her,
right,
because she's sinful. And Jesus said, all right, I'll let anybody who hasn't sinned at all, you get to throw the first stone.
Right.
And everybody's like, oh, okay, well, we just got to bounce because, So
talk a little bit more about, because you said that they're not under care. Talk a little bit more about the transformation that you've seen as a result of the love that you've cared for and provided for the child as well as the parent.
Yeah, I think there's just been a level of trust. And what's cool is, like, when you stop having to, like, trust and control on your own, you start to surrender. And so that's what we had to do. And I talked to the team about this extensively, is like, hey, we're just going to love on this person. We're going to pour out as much love as we can every time they're in the office. And this is like, can I just speak to the Kairos for a second? If you have people in your office, when you see their name on the schedule, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with them today. That's the reason that I'm sharing this episode. And so what my goal and my intention was, and the intention of sharing this with you, is like, pride and ego are going to tell you to do all these salesy things. Love and realizing that you're enough regardless of they choose in or out is like the most precious thing you can do in practice.
Because the yes or no is not really a reflection on you as the provider. Yeah. It's a reflection on them and where they're at that time.
But most people think that it is.
Sure.
So that's where I said in the beginning is like, the tactics, I could give you the exact thing to overcome with the objections and exactly what to say. And you could do the guarantee, and you could do all the stuff that, like, a lot of the gurus teach. But at the end of the day, it's like, if you don't have a heart of love and you're not creating that environment inside of your practice,
right,
like, those people might say yes, but then they're going to frustrate you for the next 6 months or however long they commit to you. Or they commit to you and then they stop early, and then you wonder why, and you're frustrated and you feel like you did something wrong, even though they were never fit in the first place. So it's like, the strategies are only as good as your heart posture. And the heart posture is the thing that I believe matters more, that has to be built before you can add tactics and strategies to the mix of what you're doing in your practice to get people under care. So go ahead.
Did you talk about, like, what you noticed within them?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is just a surrender of, like, okay, everybody else their entire lives has told them that your kids are broken, your family's broken, that they have issues, that they need to be fixed. And this is the first place that didn't do that. And so that's created a level of control. So I want to control what my kid does, when they do it, how they do it. And there's all this control involved, where now it seems to be an easing and just a more peaceful heart of like, okay, maybe I can just trust that there's something inside of my family, inside of each of my family members, that can express itself at 100%. I don't need to be in control of the outcomes because I'm not smarter than their body, which is really like a God principle. And that's a main principle that we operate by in the office.
Yes.
And so there's been a level of peace and a level of what I would call surrender to a different process where they don't have to be as on guard or as protective or like have a wall up or feel like they're going to get, I don't know, maybe manipulated in some way or whatever it is.
Sure.
And again, it just comes from a place of love.
Yeah. Because didn't you say too, like, you even saw a different interaction between the parent and the child, like, after a few weeks, because they were surrendering and, like, letting their guards down?
Yeah. I've just seen more joy overall, which is cool from all parties involved. More smiles, more laid back, not so uptight. And it's like that, we didn't even have to put our hands, and this happens all the time, where we'll have people come in and they're like, oh, this thing that I had going on is way better since I came in for my exam, even though we don't adjust on the first visit. So the reason that happens is because we're facilitating a space. And again, like, I know it sounds so hippie, but it's just a space of love where it's like, we know who God created people to be.
Right.
And he didn't make a mistake with any of us. And all the other stuff is just baggage that when you love someone unconditionally, like, some of that stuff has to fall away.
Yeah.
And that's what we're really after. So that's one example from someone who we haven't taken care of. Another situation. So we have another client we've been taking care of for a while, and they're riddled with a lot of addiction and a lot of just past dark trauma,
yeah, bondage.
Grew up in a like very traumatic household. And so what's crazy is this particular client has had a whole bunch of stuff going on. And so for me, I was really torn in the beginning. I'm like, there's no way. This is the story that I told myself. I'm like, there's no way that this person can afford care, let alone for their entire family.
Right.
And so I'm like, do I just go halfway and like kind of do a lackluster exam, or like pour out my full passion, and knowing that there's like a ton of addiction and a ton of stuff to overcome? And I think some chiros would look at somebody and be like, listen, if you can't like stop all your medications and all the stuff that you're taking and vaping and all the stuff that you're eating, like, if you can't change those things, we can't help you. But what I realize is, like, I think the way to actually help people is to, again, just like love them where they're at. And I'll give the framework for this in just a second. So this person, I'm like really in this struggle, in this battle mentally of like, okay, can they even afford it? Like, am I doing an irresponsibility by recommending care for them and their family in the first place? 2, are the addictions that they have in their lives even going to be overcome by just adjusting someone? And even though I'm so sold out on chiropractic care, I'm like, it makes it exponentially harder when people are just poisoning their bodies from all different angles.
Sure.
So this is the first time, and let me back up for a second. There's a level of pride where I would operate from the place of like, well, I'm better than them because I overcame that. And like, we don't, again, this is how I was raised. My dad taught me, like, we don't talk to people like that. We don't interact with addicts. We don't work with people who are that level of financial income, or people who live in that neighborhood. And like all the time, I mean, I literally have friends when I was growing up who were raised, like, they lived in a trailer park. And my dad taught me is like, we don't hang out there. So you can imagine, like, I'm grown up this way. I think that's normal to just be like, we don't interact with them. We don't talk to them. And so someone comes in the office and there's still these little fragments where I want to be like, yeah, we're not going to be able to help you. Right. But because the ego has been broken and the pride has been broken, I can identify those places that are not truly like me or who God, I would argue, called us to be.
Sure.
So same conversation with the team, like, listen, we're going to pour out so much love on this person that they've never experienced before, that they're going to have miracles and breakthroughs. So first, kiddo starts to have really good results. Both kiddos start having really good results. And then first re-exam really wasn't that great or that impactful. But what's so cool and so special to me is mom, after just over, I think, 12 weeks, lays on the table a couple weeks ago and admits full on, she's like, hey, I've had this addiction to this drug and I'm done. Like, and I feel so much clearer since I've stopped. And it's been like this revitalization of what I would argue her entire life. And I think this team's seen too, that things are just changing. But it was chiro care, yes, but it wasn't a specific technique. It's not because I got better at technique or George got better at technique.
Right.
It's not because we had another sales tactic or we were doing other table talk that like allowed her to get better results. What it was our commitment to, yes, there's a lot of brokenness and a lot of trauma, and all we're going to do is just overcome it with love.
Yeah, you just created that opportunity for her to surrender her mental and emotional state and surrender her heart to something more as far as a possibility. Like, you woke up her brain to allow her to get to a space where she's like, okay, this is possible.
Yep. And it was, what's crazy is it was seemingly overnight that it happened. It's just so wild. And it's like, again, not because we're amazing, but that's what the body's capable of. But we certainly, as providers, and even if you're not a provider, like encouraging your team that, hey, when you pour out enough of your heart onto people, there's two options. They're either going to radically transform and you're going to experience miracles with them, or they're just going to leave because it's too much for them.
Because they're not in the right space to be able to handle that kind of love.
It's hard to receive. Yeah.
Yes,
So like if you're so traumatized, your brain is literally going to be on protect mode.
Sure.
And so if it's too much, sometimes people just opt to go the other way. And that's an individual decision. It's not good, bad, right, or wrong.
Well, we've had clients that have done that. I remember distinctly after like 4 weeks, a client specifically said that they didn't like getting hugged by you every single adjustment. It was too much for them. So they had to stop care.
Yep. 100% for sure. And that was back before any of
like
the
they just
transformation.
They weren't used to receiving love on a consistent basis like that.
Yeah. So I think like the lesson in all of it, right? If we talk about the challenges of wanting to possibly like dismiss people from care, tell them they were not good fit or whatever, or having those people that are like, man, are they going to be a pain in the butt? Like every time we come in, you just love them. Where my ego before would have been like, we don't need you. We don't want you. I don't want to help you because it's about me. Or guaranteeing them a whole bunch of stuff where you just have like, for me, it would have been pride and like, I'm just better than these people and I don't really want to be around them. Like straight up.
No, I know. That used to be you for sure.
Which is, I'm not bragging about it, but it's like that had to be broken down to get the level of results of the two stories I just shared. And what's cool is there's an exact framework that's not complex to get to this level of understanding in this place. And so what I want to do is just break that framework down, and then we'll just talk about a couple myths and we'll like keep on rolling.
Okay.
So the first one, I think arguably the biggest change with me is just loving the Lord. And we know, I just shared the story of Jesus, but like there's so many places where I didn't realize I was actually being a hater instead of just loving. And I think that when the only way to truly create an environment is to the best you can. And I will admit, like, I was not the best last week. It's just like loving everybody that comes into your space.
Including your team.
Including the team, which I, again, like fully admitting I was not great. But so this is 1 Corinthians 13:2 says this: if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all the mysteries of knowledge, but I don't have love, I am nothing. So I'm here to tell you that if you are a chiro or an entrepreneur and you have all the sales tactics and the strategies and the hacks and the tips and the tricks and the playbooks and the coach and the adjusting techniques, and you have all of it, but you don't truly love your people, then you have nothing. And I know because I've experienced it, and I watched people walk out the door and write bad reviews, and people who I knew that I could 100% help, and they ended up not getting results because it was built on me and ego and pride, instead of what matters, which is actually just loving people where they're at. And if you pour enough of that out, you will get an overflow. So step one, if we think of a circle, if I was going to draw this out, is like literally you have to love the Lord, right? It starts with love. And realizing that like God is a good dad and you're already loved. So step number 2 is you have to love yourself, because you have to realize that you're already loved. So what's the Bible say? In Galatians 5:22 and 23, fruits of the Spirit, joy, peace, perseverance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. So like we were given all those. They're already within us. They're expressed through the prefrontal cortex, which is why it's important to not be in a stressed state. But what's so interesting about it is that pride and ego trigger a stress state, specifically pride, because pride is a protective mechanism. And I'll talk about that here in just a second. So if you can love the Lord, that will allow you to love yourself, because you realize I'm already loved, I'm already enough, I'm already worthy, I don't have to self-protect. I can just be authentically me and just pour out on people. And if they think it's weird or too much or strange or awkward or whatever, that's a them thing, not a me thing.
Right.
So we're starting to break down ego, but it starts with just loving yourself, right? So we love the Lord, love ourselves, and then that leads to the overflow. So the overflow would be all the other places where people get to experience it. The overflow for me looks like, how cool is it that I could see someone break an addiction without me ever giving them a 12-step process, or without me ever like quoting scripture to them or talking about Jesus to them, or like literally just pouring my heart and soul into them and letting them know that I care about them so much, and having the team do that too. And because I'm able to love the Lord, love myself, it overflows. And it overflows to her. But then guess who else it overflows to?
The kids.
Her kids. Because now their kids aren't like, why is mom so tired that she can barely drive the car? Like whatever. And then that overflows too, because how juiced am I when I come home and I'm like, dude, you're never going to believe what happened with this client. This is crazy.
Excited.
This is the thing that we've been praying for. And it's because like that's the way that it works.
Yeah.
But pride and ego block all that.
That's good.
That's it. It's a circle. It's a cycle. And the more overflow you have, the more you just say, God, this is insane. Thank you so much. I love you. I appreciate you. And then you just love yourself more. And then you have more overflow. And it doesn't have to be financially. And that's what's so cool about it, is like sometimes the finances will follow it, but it doesn't matter because you're here for a calling and a purpose, not for a bank account. And if you have that like pride and that arrogance of those are the things that define you, then by default, you can't have this love, overflow. Love the Lord, love yourself, overflow. So cool. What are you thinking?
No, that's good. I like it.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into the myth real quick. So I already said it a couple times, but like better scripts, better technique is the one where I'm like, I used to think like I need to get my functional neurology thing so people think that and know that I'm smarter. And like, while that may be true, really, it doesn't matter. I think just who you become as a person is way better in the process. The systems that you have inside of your practice are not going to lead to better results. Like loving people more is, straight up. And so remember what I said, that the results come from the overflow. Your ego will kill your impact. I'm going to define ego here in just a second. And your pride will block miracles.
Okay.
Which I saw.
Yeah.
A ton of times.
Yeah.
Guarantee people results, they would get no results. Even though I knew I was good, even though I knew chiropractic was amazing, but I was making it about me, not about them. Ego, no impact. Pride, no results, no miracles. Now we see miracles. Why? Because we have a whole team that's impacting people every single day, because we're pouring out of overflow for the people that we love so much inside of practice. So what is ego? I would argue that, like, I wrote this down. So the identity we build to feel safe and in control when we are apart from God. So I am what I have. I am what my bank account looks like. I am what I do. I am a chiropractor. Or even more importantly is I am what people think of me. And so we go back to the review, or the first struggle that I shared with you, the first little story. I am what that mom thinks about me.
Yeah.
Or thinks about our practice. And getting away from that into like, it doesn't matter what they think about me because I know what God says about me.
Right.
So important. And then pride on the other side is self-reliance, self-glorification, and you put yourself above God. So again, like I'm the source of results, all these things that I kind of had floating around. And what's so interesting is that when we have ego and we have pride, like I said, it triggers a stress response. So literally the very thing that you would be looking for, like we can't express, if you have to fight or run away from something, if you have a threat, our brain's going to release stress hormones. Those stress hormones are going to turn off our cortex, which is responsible for love. And it's going to put us in fear, anxiety, worry, doubt, lack, uncertainty, because that would suit us. Like I want to be worried and fearful if a bear is going to attack me.
Sure.
So I need to be able to be irrational. I don't want to express love, because it doesn't keep me alive. So if we spend all of our time in safety and protection, we can't be in love, affection, etc.
So all the mean people out there are probably just stressed.
Yeah, they're for sure stressed, 100%. But that's what's so cool, and that's what I shared in that first story too, is like what we see is that people's lives literally transform just by being in the presence of what we're doing in the office, even if they're not getting adjusted themselves.
Right.
And we have families time and time again. Husband comes in like, dude, this place is just different than anywhere I've ever been out there, because we've created it and we've trained in it and we care about it and we go all in and we're just going to love people because that's what Jesus did. And then we love ourselves more, and then we get an overflow, and it's just the cycle continues and continues and continues, which is so special. And so just remember, love the Lord, love yourself. There's an overflow involved. You are enough. You are loved. Is there anything else you want to add before we?
No, can you just repeat the ego and the pride statements with that? Because I feel like those were really important.
Yeah, so ego is the identity that we build to feel safe and in control when we are apart from God. Pride is self-reliance, self-glorification, and self above God.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And those are the things that will keep us locked. And that's what had to be broken. And I would argue that literally I haven't learned a new technique.
Right.
But people get better results.
Mm-hmm.
As I go deeper because they experience the overflow and the team experiences the overflow.
And it's not about you in any capacity now.
Not at all. Because I realize that it has nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an atmosphere that we create that helps healing. And I think I've talked about this before, but like Dr. Hall said, people should be getting better on the way to your office.
Yeah.
And how much that has been true. And the importance that I see, that has nothing to do with your intake process or how you answer the phones or the sales process that you take someone to.
Right.
Or whether you do an adjustment on day 1 or you wait until day 2, or whether you do a group report of findings or a solo report of findings, or like whether you do screenings or don't do screenings, or whether you do TRT or Gonset. Like none of that stuff literally matters.
Mm-hmm.
You matter.
And who you are as a person.
And who you are as a person. Not in an ego and pride kind of way.
Right.
But in a person realizing that, like, I'm a son or daughter of God. And the harder I go in that, and I can love people harder,
mm-hmm.
it's just going to overflow. And that's how people get better results.
Yeah, because the more true to who you are and your identity is going to allow you to serve at the highest level.
Yep, exactly. So just remember, you don't need tactics. You don't need hacks. You don't need the scripting process. Like that stuff's fine, but what it comes down to at the end of the day is just where your heart's at. And I think that's the most important message that we could share with people. So listen, if this hit you in a certain kind of way and you found some value out of it, I would ask you to do a couple of things. So one, if you could just subscribe, leave a comment about what you loved, or if you have any questions at all. If you're interested in learning more about how I take chiropractors through this process to find their true identity, find their true passion, true purpose, I have a program called the Profitable Chiro Network. It's the Kingdom Council. You can DM me on Instagram at Dr. Daniel Kimbley and just say, hey, tell me more about the Kingdom Council. I would love to have a conversation with you. This is how we transform communities. It's how we transform lives.
Yes.
Any last words before we go, babe?
No.
All right, fam. We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.